is number 15. Oh yes, you can record now. So that's 15. We've only got 2 more in our series, which is great. So this is SDG 13, and we're going to do a little bit about what it is, if there's any mitigation or adaptation we can do, what we do at work, and a little bit from other people's perspectives, our stakeholders. I lose my title slide. No, I didn't. There it is. Goal 15, life on land. And this is what it's about. So rather than print out all the goals and targets, which you can get off the internet if you want to, this is the general theme. It's about reducing deforestation, planting more trees, which is something that we do a lot of, and protecting our ecosystems, which is something we do a fair bit of in our nursery gardens. We don't do much about getting rid of deserts in this country because we don't really have deserts in this country. But we can and do some stuff about reversing our soil damage. And there's lots of that going around in farming. I mean, they're the main people that need to do stuff. But we can certainly make our own compost and things like that. And then there's this SDG is the one that's relevant to trying to protect our endangered species. I think there's a bit more that we can do with that in our organizations, and trying to protect biodiversity. So that's the general aim, life on land. Now there is quite a nice Bing video that you could use for staff training if you wanted to, and there's a link on here to doing that. What's kind of sad about SDG 15 is that we've actually gone backwards in the last few years, not forwards. And that is not the best way to go for the future. Whereas we've been cutting our carbon footprint and so on across the world, we're in a worse position. And one of the main reasons is chopping down all our forests. Not so much in Britain, where we already did that a long time ago, but the worst changes now are going on in places like the Amazon, and they're ongoing. They're partly due to our demand for palm oil and our demand for things to feed our animals in this country. So where we're eating lots of animal product, we are inadvertently encouraging a reduction in trees worldwide. So 90% of the damage, when you first look it up, on the United Nations website, it says that 90% is due to conversion into agricultural land. 50% of that is for growing crops, as I said, like palm oil, and the rest for food for our animals. But then if you look a little bit further, actually a huge amount is lost due to fire. I think I've got so that's actually even worse. We're losing more to fire, and we've actually done that in the UK as well, 2,000 hectares, but it's nothing like what's being lost worldwide. 2023 was particularly bad, as I'm sure you all saw on the news, where we've got huge fires in Australia, huge fires in California, and this doesn't show any abatement, and it is also echoed in the UK. So this is actually worse than the planting. I suppose the only positive of this is at least it regrows after a fire to an extent. But we're losing a lot of animals and so on in fires as well. And of course, the fires, they say a result of climate change. The world's getting hotter. So anything that we can do to reduce climate change, so reducing our impact, is contributing to saving the planet from these horrible fires. But it's a bit indirect. Although we've seen massive fires in Wareham, we've obviously got a nursery in Wareham. They were impacted by that. We've seen a fire this last 2 weeks in Corfmullen, our tops in Corfmullen, where they had a fire in their fence. The passage down the side caused the whole passage, and then the fence, and then the allotment to burn. So we really are seeing this firsthand. And it can be really, really hard to think of all that. But as we know from previous presentations, best not to dwell on it too much, but instead focus on what we can do to improve, because that way we will protect our mental health, and most importantly, the mental health of our young people and our children, by concentrating on the positive things that we can do. But this is the scenario that we're facing. We're also facing a lot of species either disappearing or going altogether, as in becoming extinct. And they call this the red list, hence the red format of this slide, showing that 41% of amphibians, well, you can read the stats yourself, but it looks horrendous, that all of these are being threatened with extinction. Some have already gone extinct, which is really, really sad, because even now there are things that my children and grandchildren won't see that I have seen. And that's a subject for huge regret. But we're also hearing that there's this kind of generational blame thing going on as well, where young people now are saying, it's all your fault to my generation and to your generation. And it kind of is, but it kind of isn't, because we didn't know that this was going on, and because there's been so much greenwash around from the fossil fuel companies and others basically lying to us about the damage that was being done, that I think actually we're all in it together to try and do what we can to protect the world as we go forward. It doesn't actually help anyone to go down the blame game. There is some positive news. So although these animals were threatened for extinction, they're actually making a bit of a comeback. And that's really good news. Although when I saw this slide and I saw the southern white rhinoceros was making a comeback, I don't think that's correct. So I've actually put a red line through it, because I think we saw the death of the last white rhino quite recently. So that one, just, what it's like when you look things up on the internet, you're never quite sure what's true and what isn't true. But blue whales, for example, I've seen a blue whale. A couple of years ago, I went diving and actually saw several blue whales. They're huge mammals, but actually quite slim. So they're very, very, very long, thin, kind of like the top of the Eiffel Tower type shape. But these animals are ones that are being looked after and are being brought back from the brink of extinction. Even the panda bears that we've seen going back to China. So there is some positive news. The American bison's been reintroduced. Peregrine falcons are not that unusual in this country at the moment. And I think the American alligator, they've probably got rather more than they would like, actually, because they're having to put cages and things around their swimming pools. Otherwise, they come out in the morning only to find there's an alligator in their pool. And that's not somewhere you want to be with an alligator. Although they don't tend to attack if you stay absolutely still, but once you're in the pool still, how are you going to get out? So we don't have them in this country, obviously, and they are being protected. And I think they're doing quite well in the heat. So yeah, things are not all doom and gloom, but they are being brought back one species at a time, and we're losing hundreds. So I think the trick really is to go to your staff team, if you've got a team, and if you haven't got a team, just yourself, about what you're passionate about, and then maybe try and protect one species or one animal or type of animal or insect or whatever, and maybe focus on that, because then we can actually make a difference. Or if you've got something that's relevant to your nursery. So for example, we have got bats at Lymington and at Corfmullen. What can we do to protect bats, because they're endangered all up and down the country, and they're critical to our life and the biodiversity going forward. So really important to protect. But of course, there aren't very many insects around for them to eat. I don't know if you've noticed driving around these days, when you get home, there are very few insects, if any, on your windscreen. We used to have to religiously wash our windscreens, before we went for a long drive and after we came back, because it'd be covered in little gnats and flies and things. And now you don't do that anymore. So the poor bats are being deprived of all their food. So I think that the answer potentially is to focus on one animal, perhaps per team, or one insect or one whatever, and then do what you can to try and protect that. So it does need a team meeting to kind of discuss what people are passionate about, and then what they can do, and then to make an action plan. Because even if we can revive one thing in one area, we're making a difference. And that's something we can celebrate. That will make us feel better. That's good for our mental health. So I do think that's the trick. If you can't think of anything, ahead of the new logo coming through, we do have elephants, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But meanwhile, most of our nurseries are doing a bit of gardening and doing plant to plate with the children. That's got to be good news. as long as they do it sustainably. So we don't want them to be using, bug killer that will then kill the bats, for example. We want to use as natural fertilizer by planting things next to other plants that protect them, that sort of thing. It's great if we can have a wild area in the garden. If you've got a garden big enough, even one flower bed that's got wildflowers in it would really help. And you think it'd be really easy because you have these little balls that you kind of throw, and then they're supposed to self-propagate, and before you know it, you've got wildflowers. It's not quite that easy. My mum, who's 85, recently had a whole load of little seed balls that she planted in her garden, and they didn't come up. So sometimes they need a bit of help with that. Oh, hi Sam, welcome to the meeting. And sorry, my daughter's just come back with the dogs, so the dogs are just going there.
I just wanted to say that our BCP used to have a strategy of planting wildflowers in all of the verges.
Yes, that was great.
Well, there was a campaign waged to say it was untidy and to
Oh
stop them doing
no.
it. So if you look
Oh,
now, there's hardly any of them left. So I've written to
oh.
say that I liked it and that they shouldn't have stopped it and that it was
Yeah,
important. But it could be that a letter writing campaign to councils about wildflower verges could have a massive impact if the children did it. I think
absolutely.
those are the
Yeah,
kind of, I mean, I wrote and said I was really disappointed not to see them, and
yeah.
but apparently they had so many complaints that they had to
No.
withdraw them.
What a wicked shame. But I think it's people who just haven't had that education to know how good and healthy and needed it is for
Yeah.
our bees and bugs,
We
oh,
what we could do is wherever we have a setting with a verge outside, we
yeah,
can invite the council to do it, and they will apparently come to your business and put them in front of your business if you promise to kind of look after it. So.
that would be stunningly good, wouldn't it? Yeah. And we've got, I mean, behind the hub, we've got a bit of verge that with grass that goes on, on the cliff top. So there's a bit there, but I think it's going to be for every nursery to have
Yes.
their team meeting and decide what they want to do and what they're passionate about, and hopefully get on with it. But that shouldn't be a lot of work. And it'll be fun to do with the kids to write letters and get engaged politically. Why not? Every nursery could do that. They can also support their local birds. So that whether that's helping with nesting boxes, and people who do that can then put the little video recorders in and actually see the eggs and the little fledglings and all that, which is tremendously good for their education. But they can certainly make nice bird feeders. It's a great activity to do. They can learn about how to support birds without supporting the local rat population, or the squirrels potentially that can eat all the bird food. That certainly did that in my garden. When I moved house recently, there was a bird feeder in the garden. I was very excited, so I filled it up with bird seed, and the squirrels had a heyday because it wasn't a squirrel protected protected bird feeders. So there is stuff that we can do well and stuff that we need to learn about, and then encourage the children to make bird feeders and take them home and all those kinds of things, and identify the birds, because it's shocking how many children don't know the difference between a robin and a sparrow and a blue tit. And never mind the seagulls and and the starlings, and every child should know their basic local birds, shouldn't they? Because if you don't know the birds, how can you learn to care about them? We've got some nurseries that have got ducks outside, and that's marvelous. Sometimes if you it's a little bit difficult to watch them because we don't want to watch them being rough with each other. But I'm sure with judicious care and observation, we can watch the birds when they're being nice to each other. Although that is part of nature, so just depends if the staff team are ready for that or not. But certainly we can support the ducks nesting near our nurseries that have got lakes in the grounds or nearby, and that's great fun. And I think you don't just need to say duck. You can say, this is a male mallard, this with a green neck, and this is the female mallard with a brown. And it's a wonderful opportunity to teach and to learn about wildlife, and obviously it's SDG 15 as well. I think making compost is something that we should be doing on all sites. I know it can be tricky in areas that border onto woodland, because then you get the woodland rats coming in, and we don't want to do that. But you could avoid that by not putting meat and fat and things like that out, but just the the green vegetation that rots down, mixing with the grass. Growing trees is something we can absolutely do. We've planted 3 trees outside Tops Mullen recently, and they're fruit trees, so they'll encourage the local neighbours to share in the fruits when they grow. Potentially, we can make things with make jellies and jams and all kinds of things, as well as washing them and then just eating them inside for our snacks or outside for our snacks. So that these are things that are so positive, so contributory, and things that we can shout about in the local community. And it helps with when they go to school as well, because they'll already have that grounding in biology and nature. And of course, as adults, we just need to bear in mind sustainability whenever we make a decision about what we're going to put in our garden, or what activities we're going to use in our nurseries, or what pencils we're going to buy, or pens, and all these kinds of things. Because it's something that we have to bear in mind all the time if we're really going to be sustainable, and just keep learning, because it all changes all the time as well. So there's lots of ideas there that we can do. It's just a question of getting it started within the nursery. And I don't think it's up to one person to lead it in a nursery. I think it's for everyone to decide, what they would like to do, and then to plan, and then for the company to support where we can. What do we do already? Well, we definitely plant trees through ecology. I don't know how many thousands of trees we've planted, but it's lots, and it's on the website every month when we get the numbers in. We're already doing quite a lot of gardening. Our gardening team are learning a lot about sustainability and planting up for heat waves, and how to cool the place down and encourage water retention and so on, which is through Good Earth. We're already learning about flora and fauna. I think just to bear in mind that when our nursery staff are trained, when they do their apprenticeships or whatever, they don't necessarily learn about the local plants, because it's not a requirement, as far as I know, of the apprenticeship. So it's something that we can, it's additional to that basic training, but something I'm sure they can use. I think we've got Kelly on the call, haven't we? Kelly, any thoughts about that? To what extent? I know you're embedding these kinds of things, but it's not a requirement by law, is it?
No, it's not a requirement at all. Sustainability is not even in the apprenticeship. We've actually included it in there. So anything additional that you think will be beneficial, then please share, and we can add those. We can add those in.
Yeah. So that's important to know, that people coming through to work for us, no matter where they come from, don't have as much background in this sort of thing as we would like. So we have to do it as an additional extra. But it is fun to learn about together. And it's particularly interesting for people who've actually grown up in a different land. So I'd include myself in that, but all our South African team that grew up in South Africa, they'll be very familiar about how you grow pineapples. Maybe not so familiar about cherries, because I don't think you have cherry trees. Although they do have grapes in parts of South Africa and so on. So it's a different climate. You're going to have different plants, and even the grass is different, because it's grown to survive their climate, not ours. But I really think that English children, or children that are in Britain, no matter where they've come from, need to learn about the plants that are in this country. If we can spend some time learning stuff about other countries, then that's great too. Particularly if they go on holiday, or they go traveling, or they've spent some other time in another country, then learning about that is fantastic. And also having a link with a pen pal nursery in another climate is also very useful, because they can tell us about what they have in their garden, and we can say what we have in our garden and compare notes.
Cheryl, Sam's got her hand up, I think.
Oh, sorry, Sam.
No, I was just going to say, could we extend our Tops Forest School to include a module on this, so that when they are out and about with the children in nature, we know that they've got this knowledge about local birds and fauna? And
yeah, I think it's included anyway. I don't think it's just about building shelters and things like that. Unfortunately, Diane's not on the call, and we don't have anybody from Tops Operations other than Sandy. So we haven't got the kind of hands-on people. So Sam, you need to take it back to them.
You will.
Because every child should know, what's an oak tree. If they've been going out in the forests, they should know what an oak leaf looks like, what an oak tree looks like, and what those little acorns look like as well. And it'll be with them for life, and it's not just oaks. Obviously, they should know about beeches and silver birches and those kinds of things too. I found when I first started school in England, and I was 10, 11 years old, I didn't know any of all those trees, and it actually does come up in biology. So if we can do it early, then it's going to give our children a big advantage. And who knows, some of our children might end up being biologists, conservationists, work in plant nurseries and all those kinds of things. So if they show any kind of interest, it would just be great to stimulate that. But we need to bear in mind our staff might not have the resources, because maybe they didn't go out in the woods as a child, so they might not have that, or maybe they didn't learn it at school. So I think we just need to help each other. If there are posters or resources that we can use, books that we can have in the environment, ID cards, those kinds of things. We need to make sure that the leaders, the educators have that knowledge, or that they're prepared to look it up with the children. When the child said, "Oh, what's that?" That's the most common word a child comes up with is why, isn't it? Why and what? So we need to be able to name the stuff around them. And that's quite a big job, but it's a fun one. I remember learning about butterflies when my children were little, because they were saying, "Oh, what's that, Mummy? What's that, Mummy?" I thought, that's a monarch, or that's a blue, or whatever. But I had to look it up first because I didn't know. And there are some resources, and I'll when I looked up the ones that the DFE put on, they've got this NCFE booklet created by Diane Boyd, who's also one of our Gecko trustees. And she's got the first book of trees, the first book of pond life, the first book of butterflies and moths. And that lots of stuff was produced by the Woodland Trust. They actually had some little, some tiny little kind of flip, like a key ring with pictures of them, which you could take out with you on the walks. And they were handing them away to people for free, so that you could say to the children, well, this is what this tree looks like. Who can find one of these, for example, knowing if there is one in the area? Those kinds of things can be really helpful. And I think trees, with a name like Shoots, perhaps Shoots might like to pick a tree, and a tree a month or a tree a year or something, and kind of make sure that everybody knows that tree. When I was a kid, that we had a tree called Bohinia blakenia, which had a beautiful flower, but that was our national tree. So every child in a Hong Kong school knew that was our tree. What about us in the UK? I mean, the oak is the most famous one, but there are lots of other trees children could learn relatively easily with the star. I mean, silver birch is an obvious one because the bark is so obvious. But that would be fun. Tops is going to have an animal. Perhaps Shoot should have a plant. Just an idea. So back to these gorgeous elephants, which are endangered. This is the African elephants, these are the really, really big ones. The Indian elephants are much smaller than the African elephants. African elephants do tend to be more aggressive as well, and they have been known to charge down cars and things like that. You don't want to be in front of an African elephant waving his ears, charging you. But they are magnificent creatures. I quite like this little one because you can actually see his nostrils, because the nostrils are inside the trunk, although they don't use the trunk per se for breathing, but the nostrils that they use for breathing are inside their trunk. But yeah, they are magnificent. I thought it would be nice for us to learn a bit more about elephants if we're going to have it as a logo. And it led me to think, well, where are there elephants in the UK, for example? Because there actually aren't very many close by to us. But the biggest herd of elephants is in Kent, which is not that far away from us, of African elephants. And they rescued some from Africa and then brought them back to restore them. And now they're working on taking some wild elephants back to Africa, which seems to be the way the conservation organizations work. They sort of bring some animals away, breed some, and then try and integrate them back into the wild, which is impressive. I think the other thing I noticed about these elephants is where are their tusks? And apparently one of the main reasons that the elephants are poached is because of their tusks. And somehow the elephants have kind of got wind of this, and some of the elephants now that are breeding do not have tusks, which I think is pretty smart. I suppose the ones that survived were the ones that didn't have tusks, and then they've gone on to breed. And so we've kind of genetically impacted the elephants accidentally by our poaching for their tusks, which are now obviously banned worldwide. And I guess one of the things we need to make sure is we don't buy anything made of elephant ivory, because that just encourages the trade. But I did think that was an interesting picture to share.
Cheryl, does Longleat not have elephants?
I've not been to Longleat recently, but when I looked up where has elephants in South Coast, Longleat didn't come up.
Oh,
they might have Indian elephants, of course, which is fine.
They've got one. I think they've got one who was retired from the circus called Annie.
Oh,
or they did have. Yeah. Yeah, they did. But she was I think she's a rescued one.
Okay.
From a circus. From what I can remember when I last went there.
Yeah, I can remember seeing an elephant, but yeah, that was a while ago too. I just thought that might be our closest.
Yeah, and that would be nice it would be nice to go and see some elephants for sure. I think I did take a list. Oh, this was a list. It's not my list. Sorry about all the print. This was the National Geographic's list of how we can protect elephants. So I'm not going to read it, but I thought I would at least put it on the screen so you could see the sorts of things that they're suggesting. But I just thought a lot of these are, not that great for us in nurseries, where we need a bit more of a hands-on thing with the children, don't we, and with our staff. This kind of list. And maybe it would be an opportunity to feed back to the National Geographic. Yeah, we understand that this is it. It's very adult perspective, very adult informed, support anti-poaching mechanisms and elephant landscapes. But I think they mean they've got kind of electric alarms and things like that to try and distract the elephants from going into villages, because once they go into villages and create a lot of damage, obviously those local people then want to kill the elephants. So I think that's from my perspective, I feel that's a bit obscure for our children to understand. So I was kind of looking for what can we do to encourage our children to want to protect elephants and love elephants. And it's really around learning about them, isn't it? So these are some books that I found about elephants. And there's a video as well, Have You Seen Elephant, which is kind of a hide and seek thing, which hide and seek, as you know, is one of the most popular games for 1-year-olds, because it teaches them that something exists even though you can't see it, which is a really, really important skill for humans particularly. So there are some wonderful books that you can share. And I've got a map here as well. I don't know if you can see on your screen about where the elephants are. It wasn't Longleat, it was somewhere else, but they only had a few and they weren't African. Let's see, Bristol, Noah's Ark Zoo, Bristol. Now we don't have any nurseries in Bristol yet, but we're not that far away. So, and anyone listening to this, if you are in that area, you could easily take the children to see that. That's the Howletts one. They've only got 13, but they do have a herd. I did find somewhere up in the West Midlands where you could go and stay with your family. And then when you wake up in the morning, it kind of simulated being out on safari in Africa. And you had kind of straw on the roof and stuff. And when you woke up, you could see across, it looked like a gully, elephants in the wilds. And I thought, again, that brings children closer to seeing them, smelling them. You can't touch them, obviously, but at least it gets them familiar with actual elephants. And if they get excited about elephants, then maybe they'll be more engaged to help protect them later. There were a few ideas there. And here are some other perspectives. I thought rather than, for this SDG, rather than trying to do all animals, which is absolutely impossible, that we just look a little bit about what we could see on elephants, having done a little bit on trees. And there are some charities that we could fundraise for with the children. And just some general ideas that people might like to follow. One thing we could do is adopt an elephant in the wild. But that again involves a little bit of fundraising. And there were some quite nice reasons for why we should save elephants. Because actually, why should we? I know some people might argue, well, you know, if things become extinct, then that's kind of the way things are going at the moment. But I thought number 3 there was quite interesting, that elephants protect our planet by dispersing seeds for the trees. So it links in quite nicely with the trees. And the tourists love elephants, and having tourists visit other countries can sometimes bring money into that country to help them survive when they've got famine and all those other things that can afflict particularly African countries. I love number 4. We have a lot to learn. We can learn things from elephants, just like learning things about ourselves. And I didn't kind of think about this, that other species need elephants. You can see little birds and things sitting on the backs of elephants. You can see beetles living in the elephant dung. One thing I did pick up on my travels recently, I don't know if you can see this, probably not, but it's a little slip of paper. And on it says elephant dung paper. This handcraft product is made with elephant dung and paddy paper pulped for paper high in Sri Lanka by Maximus, so a particular person who's actually done it. And you can obviously get it online and things like that. And there's a little picture about elephants eating stuff, making dung, and then boiling the dung to clean it, and then making pulp, and then making paper. And it's kind of like a cardboardy type paper. Anyway, I thought that was... there are things that we can do. We can be quite creative if we want to do something about protecting elephants with our team. So I just kind of wanted to kind of generate some interest. I like that idea, join our herd. Is that something we could borrow for tops? Join our herd. It always used to be about, you know, being part of the family. So I thought that was quite quirky. You might like it, you might not like it, but there were some ideas anyway.
Oh, I like that. I think that's quite cool. Yeah.
Join our herd.
Yeah.
Are we all going to be big elephants though?
Yeah, probably not like that so much.
Intelligent. You have to take the
Yes,
intelligence.
exactly.
Intelligent bit, maybe not the
Yeah.
size.
Yeah, not the size, Cheryl.
Well, with obesity the way it is, I don't know. I used to read my children a lovely book about a family of elephants where the mum decides they're all going on a diet. Hides the cake. Do you remember that book? The kids are small, and so they're all very strict, and they go jogging, and then they eat watercress and this kind of stuff. And at the end, they decide that actually their elephants are supposed to be that shape. So they're going on a diet, and you know, wouldn't actually help them. So I'm not sure if that would help or not, but I thought it was a piece of cake. It's called the book.
Yeah.
It was, yeah, one of my favorites for my kids when they were small. So, but yeah, it was lovely. It's the same author that wrote something about a 5 minutes piece.
Oh yeah, I know that one.
It was quite fun for a parent to read, not for
Yeah.
Oh dear. Okay, so yeah, some nice ideas online. And just to go back on the trees, these were the British trees that they thought that we should, you know, we should at least know. And I learned something this week, because I used to have a big sycamore tree in my garden. But a sycamore is actually part of the maple family. So these bottom right pictures, so the leaves look just like that, like the maple leaves, and the tree looked just like that. And actually it also has these kind of little winged things with seeds that fly about. So but yeah, there we go. We're learning something at my age. And we saw horse chestnuts and flowering chestnuts out in Brownsea this last weekend when we were exploring. Lots of oak trees, and obviously elm trees are struggling a bit, but these kind of trees we really ought to know, and our children. And the alder trees were those quite you know, they've got some seeds that are really identifiable, that we can share with the children as well. So so those, I could do a quiz, and actually we could do quizzes, couldn't we, on Facebook and stuff like that, and engage marketing to do quizzes on how many of these trees we know, and perhaps even give a prize to the person that knows all the trees and is drawn out a hat or something like that. But these kind of things we can actually do to make it fun and help our colleagues and children learn what's what.
Yes, definitely. That's something we can do. It's going to be so interesting.
Good. That'll be fun. There's the Woodland Trust have got name nine trees quiz, but we can adapt it and do our own thing. The Woodland Trust actually have an enormous range of useful things that we could use. So I'd point you at that if you want to engage with that. So now I thought I'd pass the baton to you. Has anyone got any suggestions you can think of, stuff you've done already before or stuff you'd like to do that we could maybe record here and share with others going forward? The wildflowers. Anyone come up with anything else? It doesn't have to be about trees or about elephants. It could be something else that you've engaged in, or maybe if you haven't done it, perhaps an animal that you're passionate about that you might like to learn more about. Maybe ponies or cats, dogs, foxes, anything else. I mean, I was quite interested. We had a big debate with my grandchildren yesterday about foxes and dogs, and my grandson was saying, well, dogs have fox DNA. And I said, I'm not sure they do. I thought they came from wolves. And he said, no, they definitely come from foxes. So we had to look it up. So and in fact, they originally, before foxes and wolves became separate, they were from the same animal originally. But then they split off, and wolves came on to then have wolves and dogs, whereas foxes went down a different line. So they did think you couldn't, for example, mate a fox with a dog. That wouldn't happen. And when it has happened, the result doesn't survive because they've got lots of problems because their chromosomes are that different that they shouldn't be combined. Whereas a wolf and a dog, that would be fine. And in fact, when I had my little Lottie checked, her DNA chromosomes checked, there was no wolf, and there was no fox, but there was wolf. She's 5% wolf, and you'd never know it because she's a cuddly little thing that's, doesn't look like a wolf, unlike the husky that's at my feet, who does look absolutely like a wolf and has some behavioral issues like a wolf too. But I thought that was really interesting, just to be able to follow that conversation through, about wolves and foxes and dogs and things like that. And lots of kids are fascinated with dinosaurs. Do foxes and wolves come from dinosaurs? No, the answer is they don't. They weren't around when the dinosaurs were around. That's something that's evolved millions of years after the dinosaurs died. But birds and some other creatures in the sea have come from dinosaurs. So I mean, I don't know about you, but I see lots of little kiddies in nurseries are very interested in bikes. So that's the kind of conversation you can have with them. And we could maybe even do a quiz on that. Okay, how about you? Now, I'm talking too much now. Anyone got any interest in any of those or any other animal? Fish?
I like donkeys.
Donkeys, marvelous.
I love donkeys.
and it's possible to see donkeys in the New Forest, so that's a relatively
yeah. I go to the donkey sanctuary in Devon. I love it there. Yeah, but they've got no funding, so they're looking at closing some of their sanctuaries, which is sad. But yeah, they're quite intelligent animals as well.
They're lovely. Have you ever ridden a donkey?
No.
I did when I was at school. I went to stay with somebody for the weekend, and they had horses and ponies and a donkey. And the donkey, they used to put a little trap on the front of it, and then the kids could be in a little cart behind it.
Yeah.
And, they did offer me a ride on the donkey, and I did have a ride on the donkey, and the donkey tipped me off. They can put their head right down at the front.
I can't hear you, Cheryl. I don't know if everyone else can.
Their neck down, and you just shoot off the front of them. So I've fallen off donkeys. Sorry, Sam, what were you saying about donkeys?
I couldn't hear you then, but I think it might have been my internet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We were just talking about donkeys.
I know, it looked like a really good story. I missed it. I've ridden them at the beach when I was little, and you don't see them anymore, which is probably a good thing, but they were adorable.
They were, but they used to have big straw hats on, didn't they? I never rode one on the beach, but I remember seeing pictures of them.
They used to do donkey rides at the at Boscombe Pier when I was little. They had a stable at the bottom of down at the bottom of the gardens. And you used to be able to go on donkey rides. That was obviously over 50 years
Huge
ago.
treat.
So
Yeah.
They
But
still
they-
do them in Weymouth. You still do donkey rides on the Weymouth beach.
yeah, and Weston-super-Mare as well. You can do them.
Yeah. Which I don't agree with. I don't think it's kind, but
No, it's not great, is it?
not in the heat. And
Yeah, probably not in the heat. It's nice looking at the goats though on Boscombe Pier, just above Boscombe Pier.
Oh, the goats.
yeah.
Yeah,
Goats there.
yeah.
Yeah, I think I always know when they're there if I'm walking the husky, because she obviously would quite fancy goat, not to play with. Oh dear. So there is stuff about, but not as much as there was in previous generations, neither wild nor not wild, tamed. So it's going to be more difficult. I mean, I guess if a child doesn't see a donkey, why should they care about a donkey? It's quite difficult, isn't it?
I think in general, children are indoors a lot more, aren't they? So, you know, when I was younger, you were always out and about amongst the foliage and fauna, playing various games. But I must confess, I am a bit ashamed to say that I don't know local birds and things like that. But I did hear the first cuckoo this morning, so that was quite nice.
Well, you do know. I bet you know blackbirds. You know
Yeah, I
starlings.
probably know more than I think, but
Yeah,
when I'm walking along
seagulls.
a path
Yeah,
and I look at some of the stuff, I think, I don't know what that is. And
yeah.
it's
I
quite
don't.
a common plant or tree, and
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
There are so many, aren't there? I
Mm.
think go for your easy results. I remember teaching a whole load of children the word rhododendron once after we went for a walk. They all came back. These are 3-year-olds. They all came back singing rhododendron, rhododendron, and hopefully they'll have known those. So, but that was my basic plant ID at the time. We did have rhododendrons where I grew up, but now they're a bit of a pest, I understand. They make the ground very acidic. So I think there's lots that older people can teach younger children about plants and critters. And maybe that's again something where we could call for the older generation to come and talk to us about things, or when we visit the older people's homes, that they would talk to us about the plants and animals of their childhood. I think it's important not to lose that kind of information if possible. It might prompt discussion. So again, we could give it to the operations team. So when our children are visiting care homes and so on, that they could perhaps talk about animals or trees or something when they go and swap notes. Just a thought. Okay. Anybody else got any ideas? Not that many of us on the call anyway. So but I think that this is where we go with SDG 15. It's not about trying to save the planet by not buying ivory, because our children wouldn't be buying ivory anyway, would they? But certainly by doing the small things and getting to know something that's of interest to either the child or the adult or the team that are learning. So yeah, over to you guys, really. Hopefully that's inspired some thought. And that's all I wanted to really say about that SDG. Try and make some time to discuss SDGs. I think that's being put onto the colleague councils and things like that. Perhaps they could talk about it. I think just having that time to reflect, like this hour, helps with that. Improve our own knowledge. Share what we've learned with our colleagues and learners, and with parents and with the community. Perhaps we could sponsor an Ellie the elephant or Anna the elephant or whatever, and we do already brag about our trees. There's the tip for the colleague council, because I know we've got colleague councils on this call. be really nice if you could just spend 5 to 10 minutes on SDG 15, if you wouldn't mind. In terms of the global south, because we always put a little bit element of this, I think it's more about learning what they grow and learning what animals they see. So if we partner up with a nursery in Africa, I'm sure they'll be seeing different critters to the ones we do. And I know that is part of the education for sustainable citizenship at the gold level, is that we have partners in the global south. And, you know, I think that would be a really good topic of conversation to bring up with them. And that's all I wanted to say about SDG 15, life on land. What's precious to you? Let's learn about stuff. Let's make an action plan to help, you know, maybe one animal or one tree or one plant or one bug or something like that. And then once we've done that, we can do another one. And just doing that activity is so very good for all of our mental health. And I think that's got to be something to celebrate. Anyone got any questions or suggestions or comments? No? All very quiet today. Okay, that's great. Thank you all very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Thanks, Cheryl.
See you soon. Bye.
See you in 2 months.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good.